There has been a lot of back and forth online and through academic circles about the ability for us humans to be able to power our world with renewables versus fossil fuels. As crazy as it is, the moment that I really knew renewables or a green revolution were not going to happen was when it hit me. Solar panels and wind turbines cannot create more solar panels and wind turbines. That sounds silly, but it's true. You can't create more photovoltaic panels and wind turbines with photovoltaic panels and wind turbines. It takes oil and fossil fuels, which are limited and getting more scarce, to produce those renewable technologies. That's when it really hit me that we're not replacing our modern day society with a green revolution. It's not happening. I've been interested in sustainability since way before Acorn Land Labs was started. I've wanted to understand, what does it mean to be sustainable? What is sustainability and why should we care about it? And are there ways for us to be sustainable? In a nutshell, the answer is no. We can't be sustainable in our modern Western environment. The way we're living right now is this one-off freak environment that we're never going to see again historically. My aha moment came when I learned about energy return on investment. Back in the 1950s, when we had access to tons of cheap and easy oil, we could spend 1 barrel of oil to get 100 barrels of oil back. That was an energy return on investment of 100 barrels for one. Today, we spend 1 barrel of oil in terms of energy to pull oil out of the ground, move it, refine it, transport it. We get 15 barrels of oil back because we have got such less abundant deposits to access. That is when it really clicked for me. When we're spending 1 barrel of oil to get 1 barrel of oil back, we have no oil left over for the trucks, no oil left over for the tractors, no oil left over for your car. That's when civilization runs out of gas. There will always be oil in the ground long after we're gone. There will always be coal, but they are depleted reserves. They are substandard reserves compared to what we were pulling out in the 1940s, 50s, and prior. Energy return on investment was this massive concept that clicked for me because I was confused in the past. Are we going to run out of oil? Are we going to run out of coal? We're not. We're going to hit a point where we can't afford to pay to pull these elements out of the ground. And even today, we are using debt and other energy sources to subsidize the extraction of fossil fuels. In the North Sea, wind power is being used to help assist pulling oil out of wells up in the North Sea. Natural gas is being used to help subsidize energy processing. We have already passed the point where it's economically viable for us to be pulling oil out in ways that we had in the past. So now we're relying on fracking and other ways of pulling oil out through tar sands, which are incredibly energy intensive. So when you really wrap your head around energy return on investment, you can better understand things are going to get very, 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 very expensive for us in the near future when it comes to energy. And our entire world depends on cheap energy, from the food that you're eating, to the car you're driving, to the home you're living in, whether it's heated or cooled in hot or cold weather. You need cheap energy. And we become addicted to it and blind to the reality that without cheap energy, we're not giving this level of life to 8 billion people. We're not even feeding 8 billion people. The too long don't read version of this whole video is our entire world of industrialism, our entire world of modernity is powered by oil and coal and natural gas. And when those items become too expensive to leverage for the masses, our lives are going to change dramatically. It's not all bad. It's not all good. From my research, it just is. So that's what we're talking about today. There's no sustainability for modern humanity, not the way that we live today. The lives that we've become accustomed to, they're not going to continue on. And it's not like we've got another 200 years of living the way we're living now. The lives we're used to are ending currently. We are currently in the midst of a long and ragged decline. And this might be depressing. This might be something that fuels your doomer predisposition. And if it is, you might not want to watch this video. We're not trying to sell anything with this video. We're simply trying to educate the views that I have been researching, compiling, and trying to better understand, to be able to position myself, my wife, my boys in how we're living to adapt to a changing world. And it's a world where what has been normal for the last 80 years is not going to be normal or typical in the next 80 years. Navigating a world of shrinking populations, declining economies, and depleted natural resources. What does that mean for our day-to-day, especially in Western countries or industrialized countries, which are one and the same? This video might seem like a very big departure from what we've put forward in Acorn in previous videos. We've always worked really, really hard to be very positive in Acorn videos. We don't want to go out of our way to be negative because there's so much to be thankful for. There's so many things to be positive about. But this video is going to tackle some very challenging topics, some very hard realities, and from my perspective, some very sad truths that we're coming up on as an industrialized globe. Because we have one globe. We don't have a second Earth or a third Earth. We've got the one. This video is a little hard for me simply because it is the culmination in my research that there's no sustainable way for my lifestyle to continue. If you're in an industrialized nation, there's no sustainable way for your lifestyle to continue. Solar and wind are not going to power the lifestyle you enjoy today. We talk about money a lot in our society. Money is a set of fake tokens. Energy is where our wealth comes from. Energy is the ability to grow food, build houses, produce cars, move, whether you're in an airplane or a vehicle. Energy is our wealth. We are not going to run out of energy sources. We're not going to run out of sunlight. We're not going to run out of oil. We're not going to run out of coal or natural gas. However, we are rapidly approaching a point where the cost to extract oil, the cost to extract gas, the cost to then process it, transport it, move it, use it, is going to hit a point where we can't afford to pull it out anymore. And I really don't see oil as a political thing. I understand you've got people on the far left and far right that get very passionate about this. I like to look at it as just a chemical, a set of chemicals in our universe that we've had access to. It's neither good nor bad, it just is. It can be used for good and bad purposes, but the reality is our ancestors and their ancestors built our world to run on oil before we were all born, and we were born into a world already running this way. Decisions had been made, the choices had been set, and my last 10 years has been trying to research and learn, how does this environment work? Can we use sunlight? Can we use hydro? Can we use wind power to provide the lifestyles that we've been enjoying in industrial countries, to provide the food that's been shipped globally to industrial and non-industrial countries? Can we continue that for 8 billion people? And my conclusion is absolutely not. Since the 1960s, our population growth rate has been steadily declining. We'll briefly hover here at that apex of population for a few years before it starts to slide back down. And our entire global system is built on growth. Everything from debt to the business cycle to the way that our energy systems work. It's all built on growth, all of our economies. Nothing is built on contraction. But the reason so many things feel so wonky right now, from high house prices, inflation, is we're beginning to hit a point of contraction. And it's very likely we're not going to leave that contraction for the rest of our lifetimes. And it's not just our population growth that's stalling. Our economies are stalling. Our access to cheap and abundant energy is stalling. There are a lot of things stalling all at once. Some people call this the meta crisis. Some people call it the poly crisis. But it's not random. All of this is connected. And there's a reason it's all happening now. Our interconnected global economies rely on more people being born to support these economies. Our economies rely on more cheap energy being hoovered up to power these economies. And when more people are not being born, when more cheap energy is not available, the world we know starts to change very rapidly. And that change is occurring now. And it's only going to speed up across the rest of our lifetimes. Unlike our parents and grandparents, where growth was still on the uptick, for our generations, we're definitely on this downhill slope. And it's not all bad, but there's a lot of challenges that come with it. And frankly, it's the whole reason Acorn was born. We're looking for more affordable solutions to solve how do you live well without working all the time to pay the bills? How do you live well and not be trapped commuting in a car in a city all the time? So even though we didn't know it at the time, the problem we've been trying to understand is, why are things breaking today? Why are systems breaking down? I think many people, not just in our generation, but every generation today, is asking, why are things breaking down? And I'm not saying we have all the answers, but a lot of these ideas from other authors that we've been aggregating seem to explain why things are breaking down. Our global boom of progress over the past few hundred years has been powered by non-renewable energy sources that are being stripped very, very, very quickly by today's 8 billion people. And these sources had already been stripped by those that came before us. The easy pickings are gone, and now we're left pretty much soaking up the dregs of the energy that's left and soaking up the dregs of the mineral base that's left. What's left is still in prodigious quantities, It's just far less high quality. When we're mining for many minerals, we don't have these giant copper nuggets sitting on top of the Earth's crust like pioneers found when they came out west. We're moving hundreds of thousands of tons of material to get a lot less ore in exchange. Instead of drilling gushers like the Beverly Hillbillies well, we're fracking and spending a whole lot more energy to get a lot less energy back. That's the dilemma that we're in today. We have three interconnected declines that are putting an end to societal growth. Let's review those three declines. The prime resource bases that we've relied on are rapidly depleting. Energy return on investment is simply not nearly as good as it used to be for oil and other related fossil fuels. Human populations are now declining in many, many countries globally, and more countries are set to have declining populations in the decades to come. Our real economies, our real wealth for most normal people are declining. Real economic power is declining for more and more people. Don't let GDP fool you. Those are number games. The ability for us to purchase what we need as individuals from housing, food, transportation, fuel, it's declining. We can't purchase as much with the same amount of money or more that prior generations could. Prices for basic necessities have been skyrocketing, and we all feel that. This might feel like a chicken and an egg problem of population declining because we've got less access to cheap energy, but they're very tightly related. If we still had abundant cheap energy, population would not be slowing. People would not be worried about inflation. We would not be asking, why can young people not afford homes? If energy was still abundant and cheap, we would still be growing. It's as simple as that. But energy is not abundant and cheap, not like it used to be. That's why we're feeling this stall, this plateau, as we prepare to hit the downslope. Many people think it's simply our human brilliance that got us to be able to create rockets, to create an interstate system of cars, to produce massive amounts of corn and wheat, to produce all the food that we do. And there is a certain level of human ingenuity that's got us here. But from our cars to the planes to our pharmaceuticals, our transportation networks, the tractors in the fields, the homes that we build, the cities we create, it doesn't matter how clever the engines are we design. It doesn't matter how clever our blueprints are. If we don't have cheap oil, none of it gets done. Humans, in our hubris, have thought that it's only our minds and our desire and will to create something that's got us here. But the reality is, we've had this massive treasure trove of cheap energy and we've blown through it very quickly. And what's left is going to get more and more expensive to pull out. It's not a glamorous topic in terms of explaining why things are getting worse today. But the more you think about it, the more it makes sense. More expensive housing, more expensive food, more expensive everything is simply a result of our energy getting more expensive and there being more issues as countries scramble to access energy reserves. This is to say nothing of our increasing natural disasters that have increasing price tags, like Hurricane Helene or other similar catastrophes that are happening from wildfires, tropical storms, floods. Those continue to beat down our ability to rebuild and repair. And we'll continue trying to rebuild and repair for the next 100 years plus. We're just going to get slower and slower and slower at doing so. These issues are not disconnected. All the issues are very much connected. Let's review these issues to see what they are and get a better idea of how all this is connected. Okay, so housing has become an unattainable dream for so many of us. K-12 school systems are deteriorating in quality. Higher education costs more than ever before. Utilities, electricity, gas, water keep increasing in cost. Food costs have jumped dramatically globally, and they're going to continue to. Governments are quagmired in ineffective gridlock. Resource wars are kicking off globally. Think about Ukraine, think about what's happening in Gaza. Those are not fights about democracy. Those are fights over resources. Every war has been a fight over resources. Small companies are closing their doors more and more and more. Around here, we see a lot of small businesses closing doors, ever since COVID in particular, in addition to even businesses that serve the middle class. Like, think about all those chain restaurants that were not fast food, but they're not high end either. O'Charlie's, Applebee's, a lot of those box chain restaurants are closing their doors because the middle class base that supported them is really no longer there in power anymore. All right, quality of products and services are decreasing as costs rise. I think we can all feel that. We're paying more and getting less. Bigger companies are merging into mega monopolies. Our food comes from four massive companies. You think about entertainment or computing, there's just like three or four giant companies that run every industry. just about, from news to food and everything in between. Life expectancy has started to decrease for the first time in decades. Millennials are predicted to live shorter lives than their parents because we just hit that peak. We hit that peak and now we're plateauing out and we're starting to cruise down it. Cancer rates are increasing in young people. That's got everything to do with the amount of chemical pollution, PFAS, microplastics. What's hilarious is when all these academic studies are inconclusive because of the industries that are paying them to be inconclusive. We see more issues popping up everywhere, despite our temporary wealth. We're still wildly wealthy compared to all of history, but we're seeing the issues pop up. It's a weird dichotomy to be living within. There's so many issues that are cropping up, but we're still incredibly wealthy compared to how we were historically. So we're effectively at our human peak in both our numbers, broad well-being, and energy consumption. I'm very confident that we're at peak human right now. And I don't mean peak peace or mental health. There's a lot of areas where we're not peaking right now. We're in, a pickle, so to speak. In terms of our numbers, in terms of how much energy we're using and how much food we can produce and industrial output, in many ways we're at peak. The interesting thing is that there are not really any true solutions to fix this from the research I've been doing. Problems have solutions. We're in a predicament, to quote some of the authors that I enjoy reading. We're in a predicament, and predicaments don't have solutions. They're simply responses. I used to think that building off-grid systems was a perfect way of, solving your way out of the crisis that we're in. It's simply a way of delaying things. So we simply have responses. I used to assume solar and wind could replace fossil fuels. I no longer believe that. They're cool technologies, but I don't believe that they can replace fossil fuels. I used to imagine that 8 billion modern people could be fed using permaculture practices. And I love permaculture. We're going to keep running permaculture gardens. But I have massive doubts if 8 billion people can actually be fed using permaculture practices. We should try. By all means, we should try. I just don't know that it's possible. What convinced me that we're not feeding 8 billion people with permaculture practices is simply looking back to history. The Industrial Revolution started in the late 1700s. In year 1800, there were 1 billion people on Earth. So you could comfortably say a pre-industrial world could support just under 1 billion people. Let's call it 800 million. Well, that was with an Earth that had way more resources and was way less damaged than our Earth today. So if we go back to not having the suite of technologies and energy we have today, how could we expect to support more than 1 billion people using old methods of production, methods that are very akin to permaculture? I don't think we can. I think we would be very, 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 very fortunate and lucky to support 800 million people without a fossil fuel-powered environment. Without oil, we have no modern farming. Modern farming is what gives us the ridiculous amount of food that the globe has today. No oil, no modern farming. No modern farming, no 8 billion people. It breaks down to that. Pre-modern farming, we could support about 1 billion people in 1800. And it wasn't a glamorous life. It was not an easy life for people back then. Today, with a depleted Earth, without all the modern tools and technologies powered by cheap energy, there's no way we're supporting 8 billion people. We'll be lucky to support 800 million, if that. I used to believe in eternal progress and eternal technical development when I was in college studying computer science. After all this study, which they don't teach any of this in schools, but I don't think that that's the case. I think that we've lived in a culture where we thought progress would be forever, but progress is tightly bound to the energy that we have, and that's not forever. Now I see that modern life has been a brief and passing bonanza for humanity. As much as we'd like for all this to continue, it won't. And it's not going to end tomorrow. It's going to continue slowly declining and sometimes rapidly declining in a ragged pattern for the rest of our lives. This is not something that we're going to solve. It's not something that's going to be an overnight apocalypse like the Hollywood movies, from the belief that I've been culminating from the authors that I enjoy. So in many ways, we peaked back in the 1970s and 1980s. Where are the new moon landings? Where are the flying cars? I mean, for goodness sakes, where are the affordable houses? We don't have the future that was promised back then, and I think everyone knows that. We say that we're a species destined to colonize the stars and the galaxy. I am pretty confident we're never going to see anyone in our lifetimes live on Mars. I know that's a big thing right now with Elon Musk talking about sending people to Mars, colonizing Mars. I don't see it happening. I don't think that we've got the energy. I think it's more of a PR stunt than anything. And that's just my opinion. You're entitled to your own, of course. But when we've got a biosphere that is perfect for us, why would we focus so much on going to a place that's denuded of life where we would get cancer on the journey just because of the radiation levels? I'm confident no humans in our lifetime will ever live on Mars. We can easily imagine things that will never happen or are physically impossible, which I think us colonizing outer space that's science fiction. It's fun for stories, but nothing indicates that we're actually heading for that future. Just because we can imagine it doesn't make it possible. Nothing is ever guaranteed that we humans would expand, grow, and progress forever. There have been other periods in history where humans stop progressing and fall back into dark ages. In many ways, it looks like we might be gearing up for another dark age in the decades to come. We somehow convinced ourselves that we were heading for the stars, when in reality, we very likely aren't. My perspective likely sounds very, very Western because I'm from the US. This is the only perspective I have. I am trying to learn as much as I can, though, to understand where we're going and all the other countries in their respective positions as things change. I want to understand what's happening globally. That unshakable faith in progress that we've had in the West has been shaken for me. Now, I don't live in doom and fear, but I am trying to figure out why things are happening and what's next. I believe that we have confused the wealth produced by cheap energy with our own supposed human brilliance. Cars, airplanes, combines, plastics, modern medicine, concrete, steel, surplus grains for livestock, trucking, and most every other modern miracle are all clever human contrivances. But without cheap oil, they all stop. We've got to have cheap oil, and it's not running out. We're just going to have a harder time getting what we need. And when prices go through the roof, we're going to look at economic crashes, and basically a whole lot of people are going to become more and more poor. The oil is the magic. Cheap oil is what makes possible the massive middle class America has had. It stands to reason that as access to cheap energy plus materials declines, so declines America's middle class. We're seeing this in real time. We've been seeing this since the 1970s. It's just been slower. But here in 2024, it's picking up speed, and it's moving a lot faster. And I think people can feel that. I think basic logic seems to validate we are at the end of growth. Now, let me run you through these points that make sense to me. The Earth is a sphere. Okay, item 1, Earth is a sphere. 2, a sphere is finite in volume. 3, the Earth supported about 1 billion people in 1800 before the Industrial Revolution. Earth then was far more unspoiled and unused than what we have today. Today it's far more poisoned and polluted. 4, pockets of this sphere called Earth have a rare and powerful energy source, oil. We discovered the most energy-dense substance we'd ever discovered before, being oil, and we harnessed it. 6, since we're on a finite planet, oil is finite, and it's not being regenerated quickly, not quickly at all. Oil takes a much, much longer time to generate than we humans can afford to wait. Oil is not something that simply regenerates in a few hundred years, let alone within decades. Certainly not within our lifetimes. That's point 7. 8, it takes energy to explore, drill, pump, transport, refine, and harness oil. That's energy return on investment, EROI. Energy return on investment is the energy we have left over from this process. That's what we get to use for farming and for driving our cars around. Oil is now critical to how we feed, clothe, house, entertain, and move 8 billion people. Without oil, no mega farms, no pesticides, no trucking, no cheap fertilizer. Point 10, if easy to gather pockets of oil were left, we would not be spending billions of dollars on deep sea oil rigs or take the trouble to frack for the last dregs of oil that are left around older oil wells or in shell formations. 11. On paper, we're extracting more oil today than ever before globally. But this does not reflect that we're drilling more than ever globally and getting less oil for our effort and energy invested. The EROI, energy return on investment, used to be spending 1 barrel of oil to obtain 100 barrels back in the heyday of American oil, circa 1950s. 13. Today, we're spending 1 barrel of oil to obtain 15 barrels back. This is a massively diminished EROI, energy return on investment. If you feel poorer, this is why we feel poorer than the 70s. This dynamic makes everything more expensive: food, travel, housing, medical expenses, manufacturing, etc. 15. Money is not wealth. Money is just imaginary tokens, especially fiat money. 16. These tokens are just a paper system to make a claim on future energy. Your dollar bill is not wealth. Your dollar bill is a claim on energy. When you spend $10 to buy a burger at McDonald's, you're buying all the energy it took to produce that burger, to feed that cow, to move the beef, to harvest the wheat, to grow the lettuce, to pump the water. That's what your $10 is buying. It's buying that energy. 17, personal access to energy today is actual wealth. If you can access energy, you've got wealth. GDP and energy consumption track in a totally correlated manner. They're locked together, GDP and energy consumption. If a country doesn't have energy, they're poor. 18, access to energy provides access to food, housing, water, travel, goods, etc. 19, cheap diesel fuel comes from abundant oil. 20, diesel fuel is a set percentage of a barrel of refined oil. You're not going to get more or less diesel per barrel of oil. That's pretty much a set percentage. Diesel fuel is required to move our goods globally. 22, diesel fuel is required to farm for billions of people. 23, diesel fuel is required to mine for rare earth minerals. 24, rare earth minerals are required for making solar panels and batteries, and many, many other things. 25, rare earth minerals and aggregates mined by diesel are required for making nuclear plants. 26, diesel, coal, and natural gas, fossil fuels, are required for making wind turbines, moving wind turbines, and installing wind turbines, in addition to solar panels and any other green tech. Renewables are amazing tech. I think photovoltaics are awesome, and wind power is awesome. These are really great technologies, but they're not going to power the civilization. So renewables are amazing, but they're not powerful enough to produce and manufacture more renewables. You need coal and oil for this. 28. Most renewables, solar, wind, batteries, only have a lifespan of 20 to 30 years. Are you starting to see the problem here? We love the solar panels that are powering our little micro cabin. They're only going to last 20 to 30 years. And if we had a wind turbine, the same applies. The percentage of useful rare earth minerals within accessible rock aggregate has declined over the past few hundred years as we've mined the easy ores away. We need more fuel now to process more rock aggregate to access fewer rare earth minerals. This depletes expensive energy faster. We're using more fuel to get less ore for steel, for lithium, anything that we need in terms of our manufacturing base. And finally, point 31, we've been masking the true cost of oil extraction and subsidizing fracking and other novel forms of oil extraction, tar sands, with clever debt financing and other forms of energy subsidy in recent years. This is a good deal to review, and it's not obvious to most people. It certainly was not obvious to me. So after exploring these ideas in depth, I'm convinced the recent party is over for most of humanity in terms of the quality of life we've enjoyed, and we're in the midst of a ragged decline for the world we know. A few observations. Solar panels and wind power won't power this civilization long term. They can't replace oil and coal's energy density. Nuclear power won't replace the role of diesel fuel for transporting goods. The electricity is great, but it can't produce liquid fuel for transport. Building a hideaway bunker on Hawaii with billionaires is not the answer. This decline will take decades. You can't hide this out in a bunker. A homestead in the country is not a fail-proof plan by any means. This is what I used to think. Nobody on earth can be truly self-sufficient. We can only learn to live with less. I still want to build homesteads. I still want to teach people about homesteading. I think that's all wonderful and very important, but it's not going to stall what's coming over the next few decades. And everyone is not going to move to a homestead. It's not going to happen. Escaping society to live as an off-grid hermit is not going to work. We humans are meant to thrive in small groups, so as much as we might want to unplug and head for the woods, that's not going to fix the problem that we're in, and it's not going to be an escape. A stable state economy is not possible for 8 billion people. Most people don't realize that we're at the edge of decisive decline, and there's nothing we can do to reverse that. We likely won't see some rapid apocalypse style ending like in Hollywood. It's going to be very long and ragged. The decline we're going to experience could take, here in America, 100 to 200, 300 years before we're back to living, a subsistence style life, if it comes to that. We're more likely to experience a series of major crises over the next 100 years. These major crises will steadily batter civilization until we're a fraction of today's 8 billion humans. And I know this is dismal stuff. This is not what we've done in the past at Acorn, and we don't want to focus exclusively on this in the future. I wouldn't be sharing it if I didn't actually believe it, coming to these conclusions through the research I've been doing. We'll have brief periods of reprieve between the staggered and increasing crisis. Giving up because it seems impossible is not the answer. There might not be solutions, but it doesn't mean that we just give up. We can't. We're here. We simply have to adapt and learn to change. We're going to live with less. However, this doesn't have to be all doom and gloom. It really doesn't. What's happening is something that happens in nature. Populations of organisms explode in growth, and for various reasons, they then violently contract because they've overshot their carrying capacity. When populations of living creatures overshoot their resource base, this is what happens. This is how life behaves, even for us clever humans. Until the last 2 years, I truly thought solutions could exist to help 8 billion people continue our modern civilization. As I've dug deeper into this research, I simply don't believe that anymore. I don't see any possible solutions to preserve the civilization we've built. I suppose if fusion technology ever actually came to fruition, we might have a different outcome. But nothing indicates that commercial fusion power is any closer to being viable today than it was 50 years ago. And I hope that happens. I hope small fusion reactors are popping up everywhere in a few decades. It just doesn't seem likely. And I'd rather prepare for it not happening than it happening. So this process is not new. Look to past societies that grew and fell: ancient Rome, the Mayans, Easter Island, and so on. This is actually a pretty old tale, and we're simply the final group here that is global for this to occur. That's what makes it unique. We're a global economy, and this is going to impact the entire world. This time, it's on a global scale. This doesn't mean that humanity's over, far from it. It simply means we need to reorient our mindset. The growth we're used to is ending rapidly. Soon, we'll be in long-term contraction from population, economics, resources. This will mean a few things for everybody: less cheap energy to use, less jobs and more layoffs. There are going to be less people being born, less travel and vacations, less materialism and consumerism. We're going to have less waste and excess, less eating out, less processed foods, smaller homes, and simpler pleasures. This will also mean, if you're preparing yourself well, more time with family and less time commuting, more time reading and less TV, more gardening and less Walmart, more DIY projects and less time in a cubicle, more skills that you're building and less money that you're receiving to pay other people to do the things you need done. Hopefully, we'll see more creativity and less mass consumer culture, more focus on relationships and spirituality and less TikTok, Facebook. We're probably going to see more beans and less meat as energy constrains us, and I know that's going to make some people mad. I love a good steak. I love a chicken burrito. It's a privilege and it's a luxury to have these things. I wish everyone could. But in an energy-constrained Earth, everyone cannot have that today, and fewer people will have that tomorrow. And finally, we should have more gratitude for what we do have. The next 75 years leading up to 2100 are going to be very, very hard for billions of people. There's no getting around that, especially people in Western countries who no longer have practical skills. Let me reiterate that. I'm not saying it's going to be hard for people in third world countries. It will. It's always been hard for people in third world countries. But it's going to be very hard for people in developed industrial countries, more than any of us can possibly imagine, because we're so used to leaning on all of our technology. And that technology is going to be fading away as cheap energy fades away. Subsistence farmers in Africa will likely have an easier time with the world to come than your average American who doesn't have the right skills or mindset. It stands to reason we'll have a small fraction of 8 billion people left after 2100. I'm not going to make predictions as to how many, but I'm confident there's going to be a lot less than 8 billion people here when 2100 rolls around. And many people alive today, youngsters, will live to see that. Will live to see the late 21st century, no doubt. This doesn't mean we're going to have an apocalypse, but we will lose people globally, perhaps more rapidly than expected. People are not having many babies. This is the main driver to less people now. This is due to both social and environmental factors: PFAS, microplastics, and chemical pollution reducing fertility. Rising costs also deter people from having children. People who are unwilling to change will have a hard time coping. People who don't understand that we're now on a downhill slope of growth will be confused, frustrated, and scared by the unexplained decline in what they thought was normal and guaranteed. We are seeing more casualties in resource wars today, regrettably. Tragically, we might see more famine in parts of the world as our industrial ag systems fail to deliver as they have in past years. This is already starting, actually. While it's tempting to become depressed or to have a doomer outlook on this prognosis, I think that's not a productive path to walk. Change has always been part of history. For Western readers, consumerism and modernity don't make you happier past a point. This has been clearly proven over the past 80 years. In fact, rampant consumer culture and digital media are proven to make people sicker, have more mental issues, and skew our view of what a truly good life is. Don't get me wrong, many aspects of industrial society have given humans huge benefits to quality of life, longevity, and well being. Don't get me wrong, many aspects of industrial society have given humans huge benefits to our quality of life, longevity, and well being. I say we try to keep as many of those sensible benefits as we can. We just passed the point of diminishing returns a long time ago for our material wealth. We're at a point in history where a vibrant social life has been replaced by toxic social media. Fast food restaurants are located beside dialysis offices. We've hit this point of insanity where all of our wealth is not helping us anymore, it's hurting us. Technology is not all or nothing. This is something people really need to get their minds around as we start to slide down the other side of growth. We don't have to choose between iPhones and living in caves. There are so many options in between. Who is tired of a cell phone and might prefer a landline once again? Can you even repair your computerized car today? Isn't it funny how many older products were simply made better or had a pleasant simplicity to them? We're going to go back in time a bit. Personally, I'm tired of upgrading iPhones and I won't ever buy another one. Same with my MacBook. I'll fix them until they're 100% dead and then buy a flip phone and then buy a used PC. I'm tired of the never-ending new tech game, and I think many other people are as well. We're going to be gradually forced to give up many technologies in the coming decades. However, plenty of old technologies will prove to be very useful in our downhill journey on the slope of fading progress. Think about battery-free tools, real printed books, and backyard gardening methods, to name a few useful methods and tools. I'm not saying that this is 100% accurate and will absolutely come to pass. However, the data that I see does point in this general direction firmly. God willing, there is not a massive and painful decline. If there is, I pray it's a slow decline rather than very abrupt. It will likely be a series of jolting crises playing out over the rest of our lifetimes. Frankly, this is what we've been seeing since the 1970s oil shocks. But it's been more pronounced since 9/11, followed by the 2008 great financial crisis, COVID, and the current wars that are beginning. The next shock could likely be a depression, or a Great Depression, between now and 2030, give or take, or an energy crisis spurred by the conflict abroad and the decline of U.S. hegemony and dollar dominance. All signs point to more shocks and declines being rapid by the 2030s to mid-century. Tragedy is a part of history. Many modern humans have enjoyed more abundance in the last 100 years than most humans ever have in history. Nothing grows forever, not even the schemes of humans. No politician would ever share this view publicly. It would be career-ending. No corporate executive would ever share this view publicly. It would tank their stocks. I'm not a politician, and I've got no corporation with stocks to tank. And this is the conclusion I've come to, so I'm going to share it. And I'm sure we'll still have subscribers leave and people not like it if they don't like the message, but I do feel like it's something that's worth sharing if you have been paying attention to what's happening. No country will voluntarily start preparing through austerity. People would riot. So we're not going to prepare for this globally, civilizationally, societally. We should have started preparing for this in the 80s, but humans don't work that way. We're going to put pedal to the metal and gas it until the car falls apart. We will simply keep running this giant global machine until countless little regional failures roll into massive nationwide failures and shortages. We're already seeing that. The last few days, 10 million people in Cuba have been without power as their grid has collapsed. And that's for many man-made reasons as well, and poor government. Cuba is just a harbinger of what's coming for other countries. The failures will be regional at first, much like Cuba losing power for 10 million people in October of 2024, or the towns in North Carolina being wiped away by Helene, or the conflict in Gaza and Ukraine, or the Day Zero water crisis in South Africa. The USA will keep trying to repair itself from hurricanes like Helene, chemical plant fires like the one in Georgia, near us, from Biolab, western wildfires, train derailments in Ohio, and the Day Zero water crisis in South Africa. The USA will keep trying to repair itself from hurricanes like Helene, chemical plant fires like the one in Georgia, near us, from Biolab, western wildfires, train derailments in Ohio, financial crisis, widespread layoffs, and other issues, we'll keep trying to repair and rebuild until the fabric of society is too depleted, too spent, and too tired to continue repairing itself. We've built far more than we can afford to maintain. My own county that I live in is $1 billion behind in roadwork, and we'll never have the tax base to cover it sustainably. And we're still growing. We're not a declining Rust Belt county. We're in the Sun Belt. This is an end to wild human growth, particularly in the West, but it's certainly not an end to humans. We'll adapt. We'll live more locally. We'll start growing more gardens. Big companies like Walmart will eventually go out of business. That could be a while. Don't hold your breath. We'll learn to build community again. We'll forget the McMansions and HOAs and golfing country clubs. I never bought into this vibe anyway, personally. It's pretty superficial. We'll learn to cook, sew, and repair things again in the decades coming. And we'll be poorer. Most of us will be poorer. The very richest will keep getting richer, and there's not much we can do about that. We'll be poorer, but I think many of us might be happier, actually. For those interested, here's what I'm doing with my own family to adapt for this apparent end of growth. We sold many of our possessions to minimize. We sold our normal-sized home to buy a much smaller home. We're paying off any last debt to be more free and flexible. We really don't take fancy vacations, no Disney, mostly camping. We cook at home mostly. We don't eat out as much as we used to. We're reading more and trying to watch less TV. We're learning how to garden, keep chickens, and fix things ourselves. We're building local community through church and friend groups. We're homeschooling our boys. We're living frugally on one income and being content with that. We're not worrying about some fancy retirement. I enjoy my work, but I have no longer made my career my identity. We're downsizing from 2 cars to 1 car. I'm not worried about keeping up with the Joneses anymore. We hardly ever buy new things. We DIY or buy used items. We're trying to be incredibly grateful for all the little things. I used to think going off grid was the answer. It's a wonderful thing to do, but it's not going to be a solution for everybody in the challenging days to come. I hope this hasn't been a bummer. We're simply trying to get more people just aware of the overall dynamic with what it means to be accepting the end of growth and adapting to the end of growth. I've linked to all the authors at the bottom of this video who deserve credit for exposing me to this interrelated collection of ideas. Let me go ahead and just read off those names so you understand the thinkers whose work I'm pulling together here to make these conclusions. Art Berman, a geologist. Sean Pruitt, a Texas oil man. John Michael Greer, a philosopher. Nate Hagans, an ex-Wall Street professional. Jim Kunstler, a pundit. The Honest Sorcerer, a blog. He's an engineer. And William Catton, a sociologist. There's many, many others, but those are the primary authors. Thanks for sticking with us. Next time we'll be more positive.